Alright, good morning. Today we are going to look at section P6, box method factoring. Okay, so before we get into everything in this new section, let's just go over everything prior to P6. Okay, so try questions 1 through 4. Go ahead, pause the video. I'll be back in 5 seconds. Try those questions, and then we'll look at them. Alright, so question 1. What are two factors of 90 that have a sum of 19? That would be 10 and 9. Okay. 10 times 9 is 90. 10 plus 9 is 19. Now, what two factors of 90d squared have a sum of 19d? Well, if we have 10d times 9d, that would give us 90d squared, right? Invisible ones. Add the exponents when you're multiplying. But if you just add 10d and 9d, you would just get 19d. Okay. So, for question 3, what are two factors of negative 18e squared that have a sum of negative 17e? That would be negative 18e and 1e. If you multiply those together, you would get negative 18e squared, right? Add the invisible ones and the exponents, you get squared. If you add these together, negative 18e plus 1e, you get negative 17e. Okay? And the last one, what are two factors of 120f squared that have a sum of negative 22f? This would be negative 12f and negative 10f. If you multiply those together, you get positive 120f squared. And if you add them together, you get negative 22f. Okay, so we're going to use this to help us with everything in P6. Okay. So we're going to go back a little bit of a ways and then work our way up to more current things. Okay. So a squared plus 7a. Okay. Which factoring technique did we use in order to factor this? So if we wanted to factor this, okay, we don't have a quadratic trinomial like the previous section. So we look, what do both of these have in common? The variable a. So if we factored out a, we would be left with a plus 7. We did this earlier in this section. Okay. So what do we do here? What technique? We factored out the greatest common factor. Okay. Example 2. Okay, 5b squared plus 15b plus 10. Okay, so we have a quadratic trinomial, but let's look at the section before. Sorry for scrolling so fast. Okay. Product sum factoring. When we looked at this, we needed the coefficient in the front to be 1 in order to do product sum factoring. Okay. So if we want to use product sum factoring here, we have to get this coefficient in front to be 1. Now, we can do that. Okay, how do we do that? We can factor out a 5. So we can first factor out the greatest common factor and get this And then realize that now we need two numbers that multiply to equal 2 and add to equal 3. Well, that would be 2 and 1. So our factors would be 2 and 1. So let's break up into 5, which we factored out initially, times b plus 2 times b plus 1. Okay. And we did this by factoring out the greatest common factor and then doing product sum factoring. Okay. So we're going to do that same thing for example 3. Now remember, in order to do product sum factoring, we need a quadratic trinomial where the leading coefficient is 1. So we need to divide everything here by 3. Now we need it to be a quadratic trinomial. Okay, and we could also factor out one more thing. We could factor out this c. That's our greatest common factor, 3c. Okay, so that would leave us with c squared minus 5c minus 14. What two numbers multiply to equal negative 14 and add to equal negative 5? That would be negative 7 and positive 2. So our factored form would be 3c times c minus 7 times c plus 12. Okay, so these are ways that we can manipulate our equation in order to use product sum factoring. Now, what we're going to look at in this section mainly, outside of these two steps here, is what happens if these don't work. Okay, there's other routes we can take. So for example 4, 6d squared plus 19d plus 15. Okay, there's nothing here that we could do in order to factor out something in common, some greatest common factor. There's no number that we can factor out that we can divide 6d squared or 19d or 15. Okay, so one of the things we could do is just try to figure out how can we make up two things that will multiply to equal this. Okay, now this takes a long time. Okay, so here, if I did all these examples and distributed 6d squared plus 90d plus 1d plus 15, right away you can tell that's not going to work. You're going to have 91d in the middle when you want 19d. Okay, so you're going to have to find some other way to do it. Okay, so you could go ahead and try these. I'll go through them really quickly and we'll look at what we get. 6d squared plus 6d plus 15d plus 15. That wouldn't work. That would give us 21. 6d squared plus 30d plus 3d plus 15. That wouldn't work. That would give us 33d. So we're trying to get 19d in the middle. 6d squared plus 18d plus 5d plus 15. Again, that wouldn't work. That would give us 23d in the middle. We could keep going. 6d squared plus 30d plus 3d plus 15. That wouldn't work. We could do 6d plus 6d squared plus 2d plus 45d plus 15. That wouldn't work. We could do 6d squared plus 10d plus 9d plus 15. Boom. We have it. Okay. 6d squared plus 10d plus 9d plus 15. 10d plus 19 plus 9d will give us 19d. That will give us that. That means this is the factored form. Okay, now that took a really long time. We do not want to do that. Okay, we want to find more efficient ways to do this. That is trial by error. Okay, so there is a quicker way we can do this. Okay, so we call this, where's my title? Box method factoring. Okay, so box method factoring comes from the way it looks. We have a box here. Okay. Okay. So, how this works. You make a box with 4 boxes inside. Their first term goes in the upper left. Your third term goes in the bottom right. Okay, make sure you put d squared or whatever variable squared first, and then your last term will just go by itself. Okay. Now it helps to put positive and negative as well. Okay. Now, what you do next is you multiply these two numbers together. You multiply diagonally. 6d squared times 15 gives you 90d squared. That number is important. Okay. So, this was our initial equation, our initial formula. Okay. We're looking for two numbers, okay, that multiply to equal this and add to equal that number in the middle. I'm going to say that again. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to equal that 90d squared and add to equal that 19d. Okay, what two numbers do that? 10d and 90. Okay, now this is the first time doing this. If you're confused, don't worry. We're going to do more examples. Okay. Now, the next step is to create our factors. Okay. So we do this by looking at each square. Okay. What two numbers multiply to equal 6d squared? This is where there's a little trial by error. Okay. So I know that 3d and 2d multiply to equal 6d squared. Okay. Now, one of the key things is to look for the GCF. Okay. So here, what is the GCF of 10d and 6d squared? That's 2d. Okay. So let me say that again. You could do this by trial and error, or you could do it by finding the GCF. Okay. So the GCF of 6d squared and 10d is 2d. Okay. Now, 2d times 3d is 6d squared. Okay. How do I get 10d? Well, that's 2d times 5. Okay. Now, let's look at this. Step 5. Notice how the product of each row and each column yields the product in the box. Okay. So, 2d times 3d here is 6d squared. 2d times 5 is 10d, okay, which we have right here. Now, in order to get the bottom left, okay, we have to figure 3d times what here will give us 90, okay, and 5 times whatever here should give us 15. Okay. So, if we look here, 3d times 3 is 90. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay. So, now we have our two parts when we're factoring. 3d plus 5, 2d plus 3. Okay. So, there's a lot. Let's try this. Okay. 2 examples. I'll do example 5 with you, and then I'll let you try example 6. Okay. 3e squared minus 17e minus 6. So 3e squared minus 17e minus 6. First step was to put the first term in the upper left, third term in the bottom right. Second step, multiply. Okay. Now, third step. What two terms will multiply to equal negative 18e squared and add to equal negative 17e? Well, that's going to be negative 18e and 1e. Okay. We'll put the 1. Okay. Now, for the upper left, for right here, what is the greatest common factor of this and this? What is the greatest common factor? 3e squared and negative 18e. We can divide those both by 3. And we could also divide them by e. Okay, now, how do I find this and this? Okay, 3e times blank should give me 3e squared. 3e times e gives me 3e squared. Okay, next box. 3e times blank should give me negative 18e. What is that going to be? 3e times negative 6 gives me negative 18e. Now we go down. Okay. E times blank should give me 1e. Well, that's just 1. E times 1 is 1e. Now we could also see that negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Okay. So that's it. So what does this factor out to be? E minus 6 times 3e plus 1. Alright, go ahead and try example 6. I'll be back in 10 seconds. Okay, so first thing, 8f squared goes in the upper left, 15 goes on the bottom right. Multiply diagonally, 120f squared. Okay, so what two things will multiply to equal 120f squared and add to equal negative 22f? That's going to be negative 10f. and negative 12f. Negative 12f plus negative 10f is negative 22f. If you multiply those, you get positive 120f squared. Okay. Now, we look. What's the GCF of 8f squared and negative 10f squared? And negative 10f, sorry. You can only divide those both by 2 and by f. Okay. Now, 2f times blank should give me 8f squared. 2f times 4f gives me 8f squared. 2f times blank should give me negative 10f. 2f times negative 5 gives me negative 10f. Okay, now I'm looking here. 4f times blank should give me negative 12f. 4f times negative 3 gives me negative 12f. And then negative 5 times negative 3 gives me 15. Okay, so this factors out to 4f minus 5 times 2f minus 3. Okay, hopefully this video helps. If we're stuck with this, I might post another little video with a couple more examples. Ask me questions. I'll be posting the homework with this.